Welcome to the Breath of Life podcast. I'm Yulia. Here, we explore the world and our place in it through the lens of interconnectedness. If we could feel part of the living world, not just intellectually, but in our bones, if our breath could sync with the larger rhythm of life, how would that change the way we live, work, and make decisions? Join me for conversations with people who live and work from that place. Okay. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Breath of Life podcast. Very excited to have today's guest, Elina Kieft. We're going to be talking about the body as a place of knowing. And Elina brings a lot of very interesting perspectives that I have been exploring myself through embodiment, breath work, nature. One of the big themes that I see in your work, Elina, is this connection of humans to nature or exploring humans being nature. Thank you very much for being here.
It's a delight, and thank you for finding me and connecting. It's really nice to find kindred spirits in this crazy time.
There are a lot of things that you do, right? So you are a shamanic practitioner, a dancer, an anthropologist, a Qigong practitioner. But let me ask you to introduce yourself and maybe how you came to this present moment, what events, people have shaped you.
Well, that is a big question after 48 years on the planet. But something moved me when you started speaking is that I've always been in nature from a very young age. I am Dutch, but I grew up partly in Africa, partly in the mountains of Portugal. And then from age 6, 7, back in the Netherlands. And everywhere I went out to be with the land and to be with the animals and the stars and the rivers. And so I remember being a world wildlife ranger as a kid. I had one of those passports that you're a wildlife ranger, and you were learning to track and learning to find your way with maps and compasses and learning about animal behavior so you could learn more about where you were. I would go out in a little inflatable rowing boat in park behind our house. I would collect herbs to make tea of in my little thermos flask. So there was this sense of, I wanted to learn about the incredible planet we're on. And then when I was 7 years old, I started learning to dance. And then at age 10, I went to the Dutch National Ballet School, which is in Amsterdam. It's the preparatory school for the National Ballet Academy eventually. And then so I learned to use my body in a different way. And then my connection with nature became through movement and through dance. So even though, classical ballet training is incredibly rigorous. So even though the movements are very prescriptive, I had a lively imagination. So if I would do a certain movement or, all those kind of things. So for me, nature and movement have been side by side for 40 years, really, as long as I remember. I went to it was a long time ago since I thought of that, but to the Code Art. It's at the Rotterdam Dance Academy for modern dance. And then I realized I didn't really want to be on stage dancing for people, but I really wanted to dance with people. So at that stage, I thought, okay, how can I do that? Let's study anthropology, because I wanted to learn about cultures and dance. So that's partly my background, as in having traveled with my parents a lot. So every culture on the planet dances. What is this thing that people want to move and want to celebrate and grieve and ask for guidance and connect and prepare and build a house together. Let's dance first and then build the house. These kind of, everywhere. So long story short, I went to look for my PhD topic, and I thought I want to do something around health and well-being and consciousness through dance. So that's what I did. Ended up working at the Center for Dance Research in Coventry and met a Frenchman. So at some point I was working from home from France, but still in the UK. And then Brexit happened, and then COVID happened, and then that didn't become possible. It didn't stay possible any longer. So that meant I decided to leave academia and go self-employed. And at that time, Corona had happened. And in one of the first lockdowns, I was on another course where there was a little bit of Qigong movement offered by the partner of the facilitator. And that was really where I felt all the things I'm passionate about come together. It's movement, it's the imagination, it's the natural world, spirituality, and personal growth. And then in a way that is so incredibly connected. So I've never really been one for yoga. I'm sorry if people are watching that love yoga, but yoga for me has always felt very, in a way, inward and a bit like navel gazing, inward, own body, own kind of life world. And Qigong is so much flowing into the natural world. With every breath in and out, you're connecting with what's around you. So for me, it is a personal practice. It is a healing practice. It is a spiritual practice, but it is so much how do we relate to life and the world around us, especially in times of turbulence that we are all living at the moment. So that is in a very short kind of overview of the flavors of work I've touched on.
Before we started, we chatted a little bit. I mentioned, how can one person have so many adventures? And I said that I was reading the About section of your website, and I was just blown away how many experiences it makes. So what has been the driving force? And you moved 11 times, you mentioned.
No, many more, like 40, 42 times. Yes. I just moved once every year of my life. It's now it's getting a little bit less, but yes, basically a modern nomad. The driving force, yeah. I don't know if there is one driving force. It's always a curiosity to the intangible, as in what is consciousness, what is spirit, what is soul, and how does that live inside us and around us. Like, I believe our consciousness doesn't live in our head, but it is a, I don't know, can't really talk about field or web because there's no proper metaphors we can use for it. But it's something that we can tune into, but that exists all around us. That is my view. And so I'm curious about experiencing that. In anthropology, we talk about participation consciousness. So it is, or animist like worldviews that we feel the world is unspirited. And so even now, if I'm looking out, I don't see a meadow with cows. I see friends, I see connections, I see kin, really like family. And that they happen to have 4 legs and a tail, that doesn't mean, and that they can't speak like we can, it doesn't mean that we can't have a relationship with them. So I think I've always been curious to that relationship, finding ways to feel that kinship for our land, for our rivers, for our animal companions. And then in a way, I've been talking about, my dad is an interesting figure. He is an agronomist who is working on quantum agriculture at the moment. And that's kind of coming up. It's a way of combining agriculture, which used to be very much about matter and particles, and what is the role of the farmer in the process of working the land and guiding the animals and making business decisions as a farmer. So how can we make a relationship concrete through, I don't know, measurements? There are specific measurements we can do in terms of energy, radiation, voltaic differences in plants from the roots to the what you call it, the foliage or the leaves. But for me, the connection with nature is much more, I don't know, a psychological one, like I'm thinking in metaphors, in kin, in connection. So it's about atmospheres, it's about archetypes, it's about being together. And that's an interesting question. We're diving right in the deep end here. Like, if you are spending time with a tree, is the tree aware of you as much as you are aware of the tree? Those are kind of things that we don't have an answer to. And yet in the presence of tree, I feel there is an exchange. So if I go to be with a tree, I always say hello and I ask permission. Can I come in your space? Just as I would with a human. And so something opens and then people ask me, but how does a tree talk back? Because he can't say, or it can't say yes or no, come be welcome under my leaves. No, I know, but there is a sense, a perception or an embodied knowing, topic of today's talk. Kind of, there is a closure or an opening, there is a softness or a warmness or a coldness, or there's all sorts of ways that we can perceive nature communicating with us through the antenna of our body.
As you were saying, there's a meadow and cows, and they cannot speak in words, but they can speak to me through the body and softening, opening, closing. To me, it sounded like a lot of the practices and experiences that you had maybe about discovering those super powers that I think we do have in our bodies and our psyche, but maybe we have forgotten.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the word superpower, I think we all have them, like you say. It's like dreaming. And so many Western adults say, oh, I don't really dream, I don't have dreams. Well, that is plainly not true, because you'd be dead. If you wouldn't be dreaming for 3 weeks, you'd be crazy and, die. There is the human mind dreams. So the matter is, do we remember our dreams? And then can we work with the dreams consciously? Can we wake up to the fact that we're dreaming? There's all sorts of techniques, lucid dreaming techniques, to kind of become aware of that part of our mind. What I was saying is, like, every child has this capacity, and at some point during our education or our upbringing, we lose this. And I think it's the same for this nature awareness. So there aren't new techniques and there aren't superpowers, but there is something about, we as Western adults have often ridiculed them or be told to kind of stay normal and don't fantasize things, don't make things up. Only it's real what you can see and what you can touch. And, so there's a lot of skills that I think as children we have naturally that we are educated out of. So maybe that's something I hear, the sense of I'm in a way an eternal child. I have this incredible curiosity for life, and like, oh, the wind, I feel the wind on my skin. What is it telling me? That's kind of a weird question perhaps for an adult. And it was a challenge doing my PhD in that way, because there is, of course, the rigor of the academic requirements. And at the same time, this lived experience that you can call spiritual, but it is so tangible for me that it's hard to put in words. And at the same time, I can feel the heat from the radiator, and I don't really know how the heater works, but that's real, So in that sense, I think I have maybe a larger capacity to be with what I don't understand and to kind of stay curious to that.
Yeah, super beautiful. And the first question is, what's body to you?
Body, yeah, that is interesting. I've learned in my PhD that there are cultures that don't have a word for body. Basically, there is no body that exists differently to the land. So only a body appears when a human dies, and then it becomes a body. And otherwise, you're part of the land. There is no difference, again, between a tree body and a human body and a fox body. But to me, the body, it is also very concrete. We didn't touch on this, but I've lived with chronic pain most of my adult life. So I have a very acute awareness of being in a body that also has its challenges. That has challenges in terms of energy, resources, challenges in terms of sensitivity and pain. So for me, it feels like I am a spirit or a soul with an experience of a human body at this moment. And that body needs to eat and it needs to sleep and it needs to rest and it can feel things and it can enjoy things and it can struggle with things. But yeah, even despite the pain I often have, it doesn't feel like I am limited to my body. What I find hard sometimes is experience social or public spaces with this body that isn't attuned to, like, for example, loud music or like sometimes they put ping pong tables in airport waiting lounges. And I'm like, how can you put ping pong? So that is kind of hard to take this body into situations that aren't attuned for the more sensitive or the more, vulnerable, or it's maybe not a good word, but so yes, I experience the limitations of body, but mostly in social spaces rather than my own pain experience. Do you know what I mean? It's the difference there.
When you were talking about public spaces, did you mean that all the noise or whatever else, the energy of the public space, it kind of as if pierces or penetrates the body?
It's like can be unkind to the experience of the body. I know that more people than we realize have an experience of chronic pain or overwhelm or neurodiversity that the public spaces aren't really built for.
Mhm.
So, yeah, like you say, loud noises, very busy, very frantic, unkind light, sudden noises, flickering things, all sort of things were like, okay, so if I would think of a soothing waiting room, I would put bird sounds or calming water music in the airport lounge and not a ping pong table that is constantly drawing your attention. But yeah, that might also be because my body is very attuned to picking up subtle clues. Like when I'm talking to the tree or talking without words to the tree, it is because I'm listening with all my senses, with like all the cells in my body, they're like attuned to the tree. And our current culture isn't like that. It's coarser, it's louder, it's rougher, it's harsher. Yeah. So maybe that is the downside of that sense of opening to the more sensorial or the subtle dimensions, that it is also harder to then be in public spaces where that awareness is not so everyday.
Yeah, it's an interesting interplay when you have such a sensitive body. On the one hand, it makes them very attuned to
Mm-hmm.
another person, to what's happening in the environment. And so it creates a lot of beautiful experiences of interconnectedness and being one. But then this same side, like this openness and sensitivity, makes it kind of difficult and challenging sometimes to be integrated into social environments and maybe social life.
Yeah, and I think that is again where my movement practice is radically important. So it is a practice of breath, of grounding, of centering, of staying rooted in your own experience. And so even like more energetic hygiene exercises, like if I go into very busy spaces in tubes or trains, that I imagine like an energetic wetsuit, like, those neoprene things that are really hard to get into. So I pull my energy field really close, and there is a sense of protection. In Qigong, we talk about the Wei Qi. It is the protective energy field around the body. So there is, especially in this time of year, in autumn, we work a lot with that sense of how we transform the breath into the inner fire. It's the alchemy of movement, and then from the inner fire in the lower body, in the lower dantian, to kind of spread that out as the sense of protective field around the body, energetically, emotionally, but also, I mean, I don't know. This is always hard. I don't know you very well in terms of, do we talk science or energy or those kind of things. but it is believed to help reduce the influence of pathogens as well. So if you have a strong Wei Qi field, that you are less receptive to become ill, which is quite interesting in autumn. You boost your immune system with your consciousness, with your breath, with your movement, with your awareness.
That is something that is quite familiar to me. One of my experiences created a pivot in my life was going up a mountains in the cold with a guy called Wim Hof.
Mm-hmm.
And he's Dutch, so probably well known, by Dutch people. Yeah, okay. And he went as far as to show that through his breath, he can control his immune system response, which he made like quite a statement and says, here you go. Yeah. So I totally believe that Qigong can do a lot of things. I've been very curious about Qigong for a long time. I haven't yet got to practicing it. So maybe that's a good place then to go next. Could you just talk about more about Qigong? Also, in some of your articles, I can see you in different poses, imitating animals. So I also was wondering about that.
Okay, again, it's a wide question. So let's first zoom in on what Qigong means. It's composed of two words. The Qi is the life force, and you see this or you read this in many words like Reiki, Qigong, all the martial arts that have Qi or Ki or Aikido in it. So it's, all these words that with directing a life force in yoga, they talk about prana, ruach, the spirit, the breath. Those are words that used in different cultures to talk about that life force energy, which is a mystery. We only know that we don't have it when we're dead. Otherwise, we can't really describe it. So it is that animating force. And so, yeah, but a human being has a heartbeat. Yes, that keeps us alive. But what beats the heart? We don't. So that is thought to be the chi. And then the gong is the skill to work with your life force. So that is sensing when it's in tune and out of balance, where there is stagnation, where there is flow, and how to direct, for example, from the three big energy centers of the mind, the heart, and the body, to have them work together to create balance. And that's something I find really interesting because often, like, for example, take talking therapy, it's very much cognitive based. We unpack an experience that happened to in our lives or a series of events that created a specific response, but it's very much from what we understand cognitively with our intellect. And a lot of us are also really clever in telling the story in a specific way that is either more hurtful or more kind than the story appeared to have played out. So Qigong, and I think all dance forms, they don't stay just in the mind. They descend in the heart and in the body. And if one of these centers is out of balance, the others can help to rebalance. So, for example, if I am incredibly exhausted, which I am sometimes, and my body can't do anything, can I draw energy or inspiration from the heart, from feeling, from sensation, or from beautiful mental imagery to gently top up the physical energy of my body? If my mind is incredibly frantic and I'm like overwrought or I'm repetitively thinking thoughts that aren't very helpful, can I somehow connect with the slower pace of my body, bring the energy down so that my mind has a sense or an opportunity to calm down? Because there is roots and there is connection to ground. So that is something I find really fascinating, that it integrates more of the layers of who we are. And how it does that is with very simple repetitive movement. So you may have heard of Tai Chi, which is in a way a much larger movement sequence that you flow from one movement to another. And Qigong is much simpler than that. So there's one movement that you simply lift your arms to shoulder height and then come down again. And you just do that for 1 or 2 minutes. You breathe in and your arms lift. Breathe out and your arms come down. There is a sense of, oh yeah, I can surrender to this movement. I can do it seated. If I don't have power to stand on my legs, I can still move the spine. I can engage the breath. I can engage the mind. This is a movement called flying. So can you open the wings and just be in that movement without expecting anything of yourself, then being in the movement. And then so drawing on movement, breath, and imagination, that is the three keys to every movement. Or, yeah, I think to the transformative power of Qigong. And again, you can often link to one of the three, if not all three at the same time. So sometimes when I'm really tired and I can't feel I can lift my arms, I can imagine doing this movement and I'm inviting my breath, and in my mind, I'm opening the arms and I'm breathing in and my arms lift. And then sometimes they start to move by themselves just because of the power of the mind combined with the breath and the imagery of that sense of lifting and spreading the wings.
Mhm.
So movement, breath, and imagination, simple repetitive movements, and those keys of where do we move from and which centers do we activate and engage. I think in a nutshell, that is my understanding of the alchemy of Qigong, how we can transform inner states. It's a system that is, the oldest records are 5,000 years old, I think. And it really emerged by observing nature. So how does the wind move through the trees? We can't see the wind most of the time, but we can see the effect of the wind on the grass, on the trees, on the river. Energy often moves in spirals or in waves like ebb and flow. The tides of the ocean are very similar to our breath. In the Taoist system, the exchange between yin and yang, so the active and the more receptive or resting phases. And in the West, we always think we have to be up, 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 like an arrow, and it's circular in this worldview. It's like, yeah, there is day and there is night. There is a year with seasons. There is the passage of the moon and the sun, and they have effect on, well, how things grow in nature, in our beings, in our minds. But just at the end, you asked about the animals. So I think there are thousands of different styles of Qigong. Some are more medical, some are more martial arts, some are more spiritual, some are very kind of like muscle power building, some are more energetic and more in terms of consciousness. But I think most will recognize animals as teachers or as guides. For example, now in autumn, we work with the tiger. I don't really understand why the tiger is linked to autumn. It's linked to the metal element, which is one of the 5 elements in traditional Chinese medicine. So drawing on the image of the tiger in its natural environment, one with the mountain, the suppleness of the body, the clarity of claws, but also the softness of paws. There's so much imagery in inviting the tiger to show us clarity or mindfulness or courage or inner peace from a soft place, because we don't have to fight all the time. There are quick movements in Qigong as well, and they're a little bit cheeky, and we can tease our bodies and our minds a little bit with monkey energy. There is the deer, which has very kind of graceful movements as well, long necks connected to the earth. It's a very awake energy. They're always very alert to what happens to the outside world, because of course the tiger is the predator and the deer is the prey. So it's a very different energy. So how can we reflect on these qualities of being in the world? Which ones can we call on in different situations? And there's lots of mythical animals as well, like the dragon, for example. The dragon and the deer, for example, they are often connected to the liver element and the sense of awakening again in spring. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that the animals become part of the cosmology almost of the year. But also of like, okay, what kind of energy do you need for going into a job interview?
Mm.
Or what kind of energy do you need when you go and take your kids to a football match? Or, it's like, what kind of energy is needed here?
Mhm.
So, in that sense, it's also a bit like play for adults. And we have a tiger growl as well. If you want a growl for, okay, this is not okay, you just do that in your mind's eye and you kind of clear the energy with the.
Yeah, a couple of things I wanted to comment on. First, when you mentioned that besides animals, there is actually this kind of integration into the natural world with its elements, with its seasons. So not only do you map animals in your own body, but you also map your environment and how it's changing at the moment. To me, it sounded as if this is kind of the embodied knowing that you are nature, that kind of claiming everything that's happening there also to yourself. And then there is a second one. I've been very fascinated by this expert, Simon Tucker, and he's the founder of something that's called ancestral movement. And
Mhm.
how he talks about movement also in Qigong and martial arts and different martial arts tradition is that this is an ancient human biological capacity of shape shifting, which
Uh-huh.
is also the foundation of empathy. Because when we shape shift, let's say into water, into birds, into tiger, that naturally brings into play all the mechanisms for empathy, just the same way we feel empathy towards a human being. And this is how humans had this kind of stewardship
Yeah.
attitude with the land and non-human beings, just because everything they felt through the body, all those beings.
Yeah, absolutely. Because there is then a felt sense or a felt understanding of another life form, which is so incredibly wondrous that we can't but think, how can we rule over that? We are part of it. That sense of we there's so much of life we don't understand. I think that sense of shape shifting allows a sense of, what's the word, not fluidity, but permeability, perhaps, as in, I think the shamans of old and perhaps some current contemporary shamans still, they can shapeshift in different animal bodies, like transport their consciousness in a different body. And then if you are coming back to the human body, that it's not separate, it's not cut, even though that body has different skills or abilities.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And my question is about archetypal forces and also the energies that you mentioned when in Qigong you um, shapeshift or imitate different animals. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so archetypes, it's another fascinating topic. I think we should have 3 or 4 conversations on the issue thing. So if you look at the etymology of archetypes, it literally means the original pattern. So an archetype, it's almost like the Platonian idea. So what was the original energy that then was brought into form? So the original tree or the original river or the original mother. Mostly last century, Jung has looked at archetypes in a more psychological way, but that's relatively recent. So I think they're basically, for me, archetypes are patterns of energy that we can connect to. And that can be like a journey is also an archetype. The concept of leaving the known, going into the unknown, being transformed, and then usually coming back to the original starting place in a different way. That is a journey archetype. It is an energy of that process. And then so to look at life in terms of archetypes in a way helps us connect with don't know if the word original energy is very helpful, but an energy that isn't personal or isn't connected to our own story. Like, for example, do you have a good relationship or not such a good relationship with your mother or your father? It's like, can we then still connect to the archetype of mother that is nurturing, even though the relationship with our personal mother might not have been good or nurturing? So that sense of like, can archetypes hold a healing force in a way that helps us be more present to our life, our journey, the people we love, the work we do, this planet we care for.
Something like checking what's now against the original DNA. And so when you check, you can go back to the DNA and you can use it as a resource to reshape what's now.
I don't know. I don't know enough about DNA. That, like an energy pattern itself, is also always in motion. So the original idea of mother now might be different to the original idea of mother, I don't know, 1,000,000 years ago. I don't know if you're looking at DNA as a concept that has a specific string of, what is it, proteins or coded material, and that is fixed in time. That's not how I see an archetype.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's a sense of an energy configuration. If I'm thinking more in terms of what Rupert Sheldrake's morphic fields or morphic resonance or the Akashic fields, like fields of information. And again, I know the word field is problematic in scientific circles. We have a field of gravity and that's about it. But, you know, a sphere or a hologram that contains information. And then so if we can connect to a pattern like that or a configuration like that, then that can help us heal in our personal journeys so that we can, again, show up to life differently.
Yeah, I've been reading lately, actually on Substack, something that's called linked biology. And the author, I'm pretty sure he's a scientist. He's using these terms. And one way that he talks about mammals, for example, which humans are, that their whole existence has adapted to existing in a field always from the time is in the mother's womb and when he is born, because other people, other creatures, other beings are supposed to create this field, and he's supposed to be part of this field, unlike reptiles, for example. Yeah, so that was quite interesting the way that he was framing it. So we're coming to an end, and I didn't ask you all the questions that I wanted to ask, but so getting to the topic, the body is a place of knowing. And also now we have a richer context of all the things that can happen in the body or within, between the body and the environment. So how do you describe or maybe feel a sense the body is the place of knowing?
Now, I say again, we talked about the different layers of mind and heart and body. And I feel each of these places in ourselves has its own literacy. So for me, just as we go to school to learn how to do math and to write, there are other ways we can attune those skills that the body also has and I believe are important to develop. And of course, like any kind of art will work with the heart, you know, the expression of emotions and feelings. And then whatever the artist medium is, through words or paint or clay or dance, or, you know, it is a sense of bringing some of the wisdom of the heart into the world. And I think that every body is so unique that it is the invitation to start to pay attention to how our body, our unique body, is perceiving. And so, like I said earlier, in terms of how can you communicate with nature, is opening yourself as an antenna almost, and like choosing the station you want to listen to. So just like you would pick up the phone to ring a friend, it has a specific sequence of numbers to pick up that friend. So you're, okay, connecting with this tree is different than connecting to that tree. So it starts with the intention. And then sense of recognition of kinship, as in, hey, I'd love to hang out with you. I'd love to learn from you. I'd love to be with you. And then simply start paying attention to any shifts that you pick up in the body that you know that you wake up with every day of your life. What is different here if I attune my awareness to this tree? And can that, like I said, can be sensations of closing or opening. It can be hot or cold. It can be shivers. It can be electric. It can be warm and comforting. That we have to find out for ourselves, because this is how we know to read our body. So yeah, for me, that is an exploration of individual communication. Openness. Yeah, I think the concept of an antenna works, because that is what we say. Okay, what are we tuning to? Or tuning fork. Well, tuning fork makes a sound as well. That's different. Being aware of the subtle shifts in your being to then learn to interpret them. Just as you say instinctively, no, you like chocolate or you don't, or you like milk chocolate or what, you have a response to that. Or no, thank you. So it's that sensitivity to develop. And I know there's people who work with tools that can then be interpreted like a pendulum, or the dowsing rods or crystals, or ways that give them other information than through the body. That's another choice that you can develop as a language between this body and the body of the rest of the world.
One more question. If anything comes to mind, can you remember any experiences where you learned through the body before you learned cognitively?
Well, I think it is tricky, because the mind is so incredibly fast. And our mind is generally well trained. We're trained to pick up clues and to interpret things, and to, even, doing research for our summer holidays. It is using the mind in a very systematic way. But definitely, in terms of sensations or intuition, that you go like, this is my body telling me something that I didn't understand here yet.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens quite regularly. So I don't know if you want specific examples.
If you have an example, that's great. If you don't have an example, that's totally fine.
Yeah. Well, simply like in terms of being in the supermarket, and you walk past a very familiar aisle that you normally don't stop at, and you think, oh, I need this right now. And then you come home and you realize your partner was waiting for, I don't know, batteries, or a cream for a specific dessert, or then you think, okay, that wasn't on the list. I wasn't planning on buying this, but there was something that I would have passed otherwise, but there is a clue. I don't know if that happens quite regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Or the sense of like having to pick up the phone and phone a friend because something isn't right and you can't put it in words. And I don't know if that's body or is that intuition again. What's consciousness? Where do we pick these things
Exactly.
up?
And what's intuition, and where does it live? A lot of questions.
But it's also, I mean, yeah, in terms of learning to listen to the body, like I told you in the beginning, I'm in a process of renovation, and you think, oh yeah, I can easily paint a wall. And then actually after, well, the first day it's quite okay. And then the second day happened this summer, and I had to peel off my fingers from the paintbrush because I'd continued too long, and my fingers had literally frozen up around the paintbrush. And I'm still healing. That's an injury that I did because I just thought, oh yeah, painting the first day was okay. Painting the second day will be fine. And then actually not picking up those clues. And then now starting to recognize, okay, I need to listen more carefully to those, mechanical messages of my body. And that is not always easy because then the mind wants to, I just finished that bloody wall. So I'm still educating my own body even now, after all this.
Okay, and now that practical question. I mean, what would you do if you are not very attuned to your body?
Well, again, it depends. I think that is the biggest teaching I've had with all my learning, depends on your intention. So what is it that you would like to experience or to learn? So it would be a very different answer for self-care than for a nature communication, for example. But I think since the conversation we opened very much about the human nature interaction, I'd say that is a very neutral way, in a way, to learn more about these intangible skills. And one of the things that I've shared with so many people is to really have a connection with a tree. And it might sound weird, and we've talked about it in different ways, but to really be present to the creature of a tree. Might be one that you know in your garden, in a garden that you knew as a child, that you come past on your walks with a dog, or to just open your awareness that this might be a friend or a companion, and then see what happens. And then with a sense of curiosity, like, I'd love to learn more about you, and then just see what happens for you. And there might be a sense of, okay, sitting by the trunk or planting bulbs under the feet of the tree to celebrate the coming spring, or harvesting, I don't know, whatever time people still have harvesting options right now or next year, or the sense of being without that agenda or objective, and say, okay, I sit here with you, and so this is how you see the sun pass every day, and just really spending time, if you have it, to be there a couple of hours to see the animals that come be with the tree. Maybe you have a question to the tree and you ask, tree, can you tell me about this? Or just see what happens. Maybe in that moment through the physical responses, maybe in dreams, maybe in conversations with other humans after, the sense of opening the connection.
Yeah, I really love that. Trees are some of my favorite beings ever.
Yeah.
I also love this kind of definition of humans by an integral anatomist, Gil Hedley, and he calls humans trees and onion layers.
Yeah.
We carry so many trees inside of us, including the bronchial trees, which of course intimately connects us to trees because we have this synergistic process of breathing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yes, and archetypally also the different stages of trees in our being. We have a whole forest inside of us, from like little shoots that just come out of the earth to mature trees that are well developed and giving with abundance, and then all the stages of trees in between, and the different stages, so different types of trees there are as well, like an oak tree being very different to a birch tree or a pine tree. And then I don't think the pines go, oh, I wish I was an oak tree. So you learn about who we are in the mirror of nature in some way. Well,
Yeah. Thank you so much, Elina, for the beautiful conversation. Yeah, so many topics that I wanted to ask you about, but didn't get to. So maybe we can talk again.
lovely.
And how can people experience your work?
So the most concrete is I give Qigong classes every week, 3 or 4 every week. That is the Qi Studio membership, and you can explore it for free for 2 weeks to see if the style speaks to you. So we're in the middle of the metal season, and you can join any time. Maybe, I don't know if there's a way to pop in a link somewhere.
Yeah.
Share that. We didn't get to talk about that specific series on Goddess Qigong in January. So that would be 9 series curated through what I call the archetypal faces of womanhood. So all the way from the maiden to the lover to the mother, the warrior, the queen, the crone. So we have 9 ways of looking at womanhood in a different way through movement, but also in community. So that is a curated 9-week journey for women in transition. So that is very specific. If you feel you're in transition, then this might be a way of using the inspiration of the archetypal worlds and the power of movement to empower your your own transition.
Yeah, sounds super beautiful. I will check out both of them.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those are two things. I do mentoring and courses and maybe a retreat next year, but that is still on the cards. So
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time. I know you just moved, so really appreciate it. And yeah, very inspiring conversation.
yeah, thank you again for having me. And I look forward to continuing the journey together.
Thank you for listening to The Breath of Life. It means a lot to me. If something in this conversation touched you, consider sharing it with someone and connecting in the process. Follow The Breath of Life for new episodes and join me on Substack, where I publish my weekly writings. The link is in the show notes. Till next time.